It's Dot. I have some housekeeping updates and some content feedback and some general goodies for you this week. So, housekeeping. I bumped up the length on most of the upcoming Flipgrid videos. So, Flipgrid is this one where you do your little videos. And I'm glad this page popped up because we have a new student joining us, Anne. So be sure to welcome her. So most of the videos from here on out, I gave you up to 3 minutes. I do encourage you to be concise, but that is available per your requests. I also posted an announcement to help those of you who've been having a little trouble uploading images to the dot storming boards, and I discovered that the issue is file size. And I actually contacted the developer and he's putting a fix in and so on. But for now, if you have any trouble, it's a file size issue, so you can just do a lower quality image. And I show you how, at least on a Mac in this video right here. I've been updating grades, so I think I'm all updated as of this point. I won't show you those because I don't want to share everyone's grades, but I had a little bit of panic in response to my Don't Panic email about, there, let's see if I can show just the general. Yeah, so here, you have your tutoring weekly Flipgrid updates, and this is going to be a 10-point assignment for the term. And I had left it at 10 points and then just given you 1 point for last week, and then I was going to give you 1 point for this week, but that did turn out to stress some people out. So instead, this denominator will change over the course of the term, and I hope that will be clear. So each week I'll add another point to the denominator and hopefully a point to your score, and on we'll go. So grades for those are updated. Grades for what should be completed. All of this, intro, the standards and cognitive model, your Google form, mapping your assessments that you use onto the cognitive model, those were from last week, mapping the Oakton plan onto the cognitive model, your examples of weak cultural validity. One of those was from the SBAC, so I gave you credit for taking the SBAC when you submitted this. If you are someone who posted only one image here to the examples of weak cultural validity dot storming board, the request was to post one from the SBAC and one from some other assessment you use. So I just left your score blank for now, and I'll change that when I see that other component included. The dot storm for cultural validity, this is going back to your old dot storming board, and I think there was some confusion about that. So let me show you what's going on there. Here's dot storming, and so I show all these boards. You probably just have these two. So this is the new one for this week, number 3.3. And this is the one where you were to post one image from the SBAC and one image from some other tool you use, and indicate or do some analysis regarding cultural validity. And most of you did that at least with one assessment. And if you only did one, again, make sure you do the SBAC or the other one that you're missing. So the other board is the one we used last week, and I think there was a little confusion about this because I had several people missing this assignment, so that tells me that my communication wasn't very good. So we're going back to 2.1. This is where you posted an assessment that you currently use in your classroom or would use, and then you did some analysis of it last week. And what I was looking for was an additional comment toward the bottom, or at the bottom, that does an analysis regarding cultural validity. So to what degree is that a culturally valid assessment? I believe the prompt in the description, here we can go right there, was what would strengthen it in terms of cultural validity and so on. So here's week 3. This is what you already completed. Here's the overview. I hope you're reading these overview pages. And then here it asks you to return to that task 2.1 dot storming and add a comment to your card addressing cultural validity. What aspects of this assessment tool strengthen its validity, and what aspects of this assessment tool introduce potential bias or weaken its cultural validity. So you can still jump in there and get that completed if you missed that. Okay, so another little bit of logistics. Anne, our newer student, had asked that we do a discussion board related to vocabulary assessment, and we will be reading a chapter on that, but I just added it in here by request, assessing vocabulary. So it's underneath activities, discussions, and you all can use this however you like. You might share examples of how you assess vocabulary, discuss the trials and tribulations of doing so, and so on. Okay, so your mapping onto the cognitive model, I think almost everyone got that worked out. So you're able to download and then re-upload and kind of show the mapping. So let's see. Here we go. I'm just going to show an example here. So this is the assignment I'm talking about. And this happens to be Amy's, and I'm going to give you some feedback in general that's not directed at Amy's in particular, but just to give you a visual support. So I really appreciate you being game to try this out. This activity of mapping assessments onto this model is something I do in my face-to-face classes using high-tech tools like markers and construction paper. So I'm glad that it's translated here. And your maps and your comments show me a lot of strong thinking about the purposes of assessments and how a constellation of assessments can fit together to inform us about a student's literacy development. So I'm going to clarify a few things today, and then we'll continue discussing and see if we can, in our conversation about this, even move toward a consensus mapping that we could all agree on. So as I mentioned, some of us tend to be a little overly kind or generous with assigning assessments to the boxes on the model. And as you do this kind of mapping, which I hope you'll think about doing for your own practice or for your own class or school, I'd like to encourage you to be a little more literal. So really distinguish between the skills and strategies a student might incorporate into their work on the assessment and the skills and strategies that are directly assessed by the assessment. So, anytime I'm reading, I'm using all of these boxes, really, but as a teacher is examining whatever the assessment tool is or listening to my reading in a particular way, what is that teacher able to take away? What is recorded, what is remembered, what is acted upon? So we're distinguishing between what strategies and skills are used versus what are assessed directly. Let's see. So I gave this example, but I'll just return to it. The task of silently reading and then retelling a passage definitely draws on the student's decoding knowledge and their ability to read fluently. But the actual assessment, if it's the evaluation of the retelling, does not give the teacher any direct information about decoding or about which vowel patterns or rhymes, R-I-M-E, rhymes, are presenting problems for the students, or their accuracy rate, prosody, parsing, etc. So I wouldn't mark the decoding or fluency and context boxes for that assessment if what's recorded is just something about the retelling. So similarly, the student is going to do best on a silent read and retell assessment if that student has command of a range of comprehension strategies. So these pieces down in Pathway 3. But the assessment doesn't give us specific information about the student's comprehension strategy, knowledge, or use. So you want to consider whether the assessment provides you specific and actionable information about the specific aspect of reading in the box. It's also really helpful to think about things like the home family survey as a source of data about students' literacy. That's valid and useful information. We can't graph those results, but often qualitative data sources are the most informative. For some of you, it might be helpful to re-emphasize the distinction between phonemic awareness and phonics. So phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and manipulate the sounds in spoken words, the smallest sounds of language. So it's typically assessed apart from print. Um, my son hardly knows any letters yet, but I can assess his phonemic awareness. So, for example, I might say the word cat without showing it to you and ask you to say the first sound, k, and you wouldn't be looking at the printed word. That's phonemic awareness. And phonics knowledge is essentially the ability to map printed letters onto sounds. So we need to map printed letters onto sounds in order to decode words and then also to encode them in our spelling. So the informal phonics inventory asks students to look at printed letters and words and say them and their sounds. So it's an assessment of phonics knowledge. And certainly phonemic awareness is going to benefit a student taking that informal phonics inventory, but the assessment is directly assessing phonics, not phonemic awareness. So, if you wanted to know if there was a phonemic awareness issue, that would be typically a different assessment. They're tied together. It's a little mushier than that, but it's important to know that they're not the same thing. And similarly, the DIBELS nonsense word fluency screener is testing phonics knowledge directly, but it isn't directly providing information about phonemic awareness in terms of what phonemic awareness skills are needed, what that student needs to develop. I also want to re-emphasize the distinction between sight word knowledge, which is a contributor to automatic word recognition up here, and vocabulary, which is down here, a contributor to language comprehension, that second pathway. So sight word knowledge is the ability to look at a word on the page and just say it automatically within a second. And of course, we want students to know the meanings and the uses of sight words, but when I test sight word knowledge, I'm just testing whether the student can look at the word and say it. Vocabulary knowledge is deeper. That's knowledge of word meanings, and that knowledge exists along a continuum. Like, I recognize a word, I have a sense of what it means, I can give a thorough definition and use it in multiple ways, etc. So I want students to be able to recognize and even be able to spell target vocabulary words, but when I assess vocabulary, what I'm trying to find out is if the students know those word meanings and if they can use those word meanings. I could probably assess vocabulary without print, for example, using something like the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, because it's about meaning and not about recognizing the word. The San Diego Quick is an assessment that it actually appears in the comprehension chapter in your textbook. And the students just read a list of words but don't discuss the meanings. And so what we're checking there is whether those words are sight words for the student. It's not a vocabulary assessment. The San Diego Quick appears in the comprehension chapter because it's a quick screening tool that can serve as a temporary proxy for a fuller comprehension assessment, just for the purpose of matching a student with appropriate level texts. So it doesn't actually assess comprehension, but in a pinch, we can use it to help us figure out what level text to start a student with. Assessing grammar gives us some information about knowledge of sentence structures, but it doesn't tell us about knowledge of text structure, like cause effect, problem solution, problem, rising action, climax, resolution, those kinds of things. Fluency in context up here refers to reading connected text, prose, sentences, stories, etc., not word lists. So this is connected text, like meaningful text, rather than word lists. And the fluency in context means reading with accuracy, appropriate rate, and prosody or parsing. So it's not just saying the words fast and correctly, it's also about using prosody, expression, and parsing. DIBELS, oral reading fluency,